Welcome to the Real Estate PB&J Hour on Money Talk 1310 and 100.9 FM. Rose and Womble Realtor Paul Fuqua is here to share market facts, the fundamentals of selling, buying, owning, and improving your home, plus interesting experts. Now, here is Paul.
Well, good afternoon, folks. I'm happy that we have finally gotten a break in the weather, and we've got something that's much more akin to a resort area with a beach and an ocean and a bay. But I'm not really looking forward to above 90 degree temperature on Sunday. If you're sitting in the traffic out there on 664, please kind of sit back and relax, and you can certainly use your cell phone and dial us up at 757-497-1310. I'll repeat, 757-497-1310. We're here to take any questions. I'm also going to promote, because I'm a car guy, what's going on at Regent University this weekend, specifically Saturday, the Antique Automobile Club of America. And not that I have age, but I qualify as a member only because my cars are older, not because of my age, is having what they term the Grand National, during which the finest automobiles in the country, the finest restored and exclusive and beautiful automobiles, are gathered here in Virginia Beach to determine, the Zenith Award, which is one car out of all the hundreds of thousands that are judged during the course of the year in AACA national events throughout the country. But there'll be somewhere between 350 to 400 cars that you can drool over and talk to the owners. They're going to be on display, open to the public. Saturday, the show field will be full at 10 o'clock in the morning, and the judges will be going through doing their thing, determining which cars are worthy of awards. A Grand National car, if it's a 55 Chevy or a 28 Buick or a 1910 Cadillac, a Grand National winning car is a affirmation of it being one of the best in the country, if not the best in that mark or that model. So if it's a nice day, and it's supposed to be a nice day, the temperature's slightly over 90, come on out to Regent University. Now, we're back to off the commercial for the Antique Automobile Club of America and back to what we're doing here. I'm Paul Fuqua. I'm a realtor. I've been in this business in this area for 25 years. I'm joined by my co-host, Joyce Carcase, who's also very skilled and a proficient realtor. Joyce will be giving us a market update, and we have a special guest today who is a repeat guest. He prevailed upon me. He begged me at a pizza joint when said, "I want to be on the show again." That's actually not true. I called him up and said, "Look, Donnie Lascara Law, I need you to talk about encroachments and easements." So that's going to be the subject matter later in the show. But in the interim, I'm going to turn the mic over to Joyce, who's going to give us a market rundown on not only the national market, but also the local. Joyce, the mic's yours.
Thank you, Paul. Hey, by the way, is there a fee for the Regency car show?
No, it's free to spectators. There's free parking. There is absolutely no cost. The only thing I will caution you is that in some instances, these are multi-million-dollar cars, and the owners really don't like to have people with dangling keys and bracelets and things that can scratch the surfaces.
Or a glass of wine.
You can do that underneath the trees. It's a very pleasant setting over there at Regent University. Regent is at Indian River and Centerville and 64.
That sounds interesting.
It is, believe me. I was there this morning helping park the trailers. There of 300 and whatever, some close to 400 cars, fully 80% of them were coming in trailers.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, tell us what's going on in the real estate market.
Well, not a lot has changed. We've got high interest rates, limited housing supply, and strong demand, and that's keeping home prices high throughout the nation and right here in Hampton Roads. The National Association of Realtors tweeted today for the second straight month that home buyer competition fell, so that's a good thing, right? Hitting the lowest level in over a year. 61% of home offers faced a bidding war in April, down from 63% a month earlier, and down 67% from a year earlier.
Wait, is that down from 67% or down by 67%?
Down by 67%.
Okay, that's two-thirds. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Why the drop? The surging mortgage rates are forcing buyers to drop out. NAR also cited the 10-year Treasury yield, citing mortgage rates will likely remain near 5.3%, which again is still historically low.
We haven't done it. My suggestion to you, if you really want to pursue where this market is taking you in terms of the interest rates, call a local lender, and ask them what they would charge, or what the prevailing interest rate for a conventional loan or a VA or an FHA at the price point in which you are interested. That's the way to find out, and those rates fluctuate daily. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Julie.
No. Good information. So getting back to some headlines, Yahoo had a headline. The U.S. housing market cooling as building permits tumble. Housing starts fall. Reported by Lucia Mutikani. Permits for future U.S. home building tumbled to a 5-month low in April, dropping down 3.2% to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of about 1.2 million units in April. That's the lowest level since last November. And this suggests that the housing market is slowing as rising mortgage rates contribute to reduced affordability for entry-level and first-time buyers. And Paul, you remember, I mean, it's crazy. What's the average new build cost now?
Well, I think the number is like $525,000, in large part because of the escalation in prices, not only in the land, right, but also in the materials. The commodities market has gone nuts. Plywood, whatever that incredible number is per sheet that builders throw at you when you ask them why the houses are having to price higher.
Yeah, so I mean the demand is still there, but obviously the houses can't be built fast enough, and obviously this is unaffordable, or inaffordable, I should say, for first-time home buyers. So that's been an issue.
Do we have any statistics on what percentage of new home construction buys are by first-time home buyers? I thought we had that number a couple of weeks ago.
I would have to look that up.
It's fairly large percentage of the new construction purchases are by first-time home buyers, in part because they have the opportunity to have something fresh, first time, and the idea of living in somebody's old house is anathema to them.
Yeah, I need to get that stat. I know it was above 40%. It was pretty significant.
If you have a question, please feel free to call us right here online, 757-497-1310. Sorry, I keep reminding people that, but I also don't have an update yet on what's going on 664. I do know there was a crash in the tunnel, or at the tunnel, and it stopped up that whole western side of the Beltway, for lack of a better term, badly.
Wow, so you do traffic reports now, too.
Well, no, I listened to what our lead into this show. Hey, look, I'm filling. This is a day when we, let's be honest, we had a lender who got involved in a sophisticated closing and couldn't be here today. So I'm filling the time.
Filling the time. You're doing a good job of it,
I'm
too.
trying. Maybe if I can get somebody to giggle out there in radio land, that'll be worth all the while. Dino just laughed. There we go. Thank you, Dino.
All right, so I'm going to bring this all home now. So here in Hampton Roads, the latest stats for May, and remember, May's stats are reflecting April. So it
okay. Yeah, I got it.
May's stats are based on the April results.
Right. So it's actually April report that's issued in May.
We always call it May because it's released.
I'm just giving you the grief.
I know, Paul.
Hey.
So overall in Hampton Roads, and that is the South Side and the Peninsula and Eastern North Carolina. The average sales price was $366,000 in April. That's up 6%. That's actually up 6% over March, if you can believe that. But up about 5% year over year. The median sales price is $300,000.
Hold on. Yeah, I think we have a call. What do we got, Dino?
All right, Paul. Well, we've got Avery on the line right now. He's got a question for us here on the Real Estate PB&J Hour.
Avery, this is Paul Fuquay. Fire away at us.
Hey, Paul. I've got one of my neighbors is going to pass a house on to me for basically the amount that's on the city taxes.
The assessed value.
The assessed value,
yes.
right? And I'm thinking about trying to assign the contract.
Yes.
Is there something I need to know about that here in Virginia specifically?
Yeah, if you want to, you make certain that the contract as you write it is written your name as the buyer,
Right.
Avery, blah blah blah, and or his assigns.
Okay.
Okay, that way you can assign it, and then you want to look at the language later in the contract that talks about assigning the contract, and you want to strike language that is specific in terms of requiring the the seller's permission to assign. Now,
Okay.
if we'll bring this up and put it on the list for Mr. Lascara to answer also, because he's very familiar with this. He handled a couple of deals I did years ago where I bought for sale by owners properties, despite the fact that I pointed out to them that if I listed it, I could give them more money than they would ever make selling it themselves, and they said no. So I said, okay, I'll buy it from you, and then I marketed it and made a nice, tidy sum, including or excluding the money that I paid myself as a listing agent. So it was worthwhile. Yeah, and if you can pick up something for assessed value, the first thing you want to make certain is what the actual market value of the property is, because it may well be substantially greater than the assessed value. But
yeah,
does that help?
Yeah, that does, absolutely. Because
Okay.
I thought there had to be like an extra
No.
part of the contract and all the rest. So yeah, that simplifies it a
Now,
whole lot.
if you're using the standard contracts that are in place in this area that through RAIN, I don't know if you have an agent, but if you don't, hey, give me a call. I'd be more than happy to help you. But the way we write it is you are the buyer and or your assigns.
That's fine.
Okay.
Excellent.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Enjoy
Paul.
the
Appreciate
traffic. Enjoy the weekend.
it. All right. I'm staying out of that traffic, man.
Thank you for calling.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. So, hey, we may have learned something out there. I do know that it works, and we can have that confirmed by Mr. Lascara, who has the JD behind his name. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. The calls are always important. Okay, so I was saying that the average sales price was $366,000, where the medium is at $300,000. Okay. Total homes sold about close to 2,900, which was slightly down from March. Total active listings about 3,300. That was up 19% from March. The percent of homes selling in 30 days, 84%, and that was up from 78% in March. And obviously, the rationale behind that is there's very few houses available on the market.
Yes.
Yeah. Medium days on market was 6, and that was 1 day less than in March. That's also, I think it was 2 days less than the national average. Overall absorption rates, and again, that's the time it would take for all inventory to be sold if no other new properties came on the market. And that averaged 1.2 months in Hampton Roads.
Now, remember, folks, that the absorption rate is used by realtors, quite honestly, to assess the pricing strategy that you're going to approach the market with your listing when you go on the market. So that's critical. Some price points have a much shorter or lesser absorption time, and then when you get up into the seven figures, it stretches out. It used to be, for instance, I handled a couple of multi-million-dollar houses, and the absorption rate on those was upwards of 3 years, simply because there weren't that many buyers. But if you get into the hot market price point, where your absorption rate will drop in terms of its time.
And that's about, what, 500,000 down?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let me give you some updates here on the south side. This is more specific to each region. Northeast North Carolina, that would be Currituck, Moyock area. The average sales price was $411,000. Now that's up 13.3% from last year, but it's down 6% from the previous month. So that was kind of interesting. 64% of those homes sold within 20 days. Remember, those are all new builds down there.
That was the point. It's somewhat artificial when you start talking about the sale time on new construction. What is done normally is that if you are the buyer on a subdivision, and you come in and you're buying Lot 6, and Lot 6 is not a listed property, that doesn't become a listed property until you have ratified, completely agreed upon contract. then it goes on, and then it's immediately listed as being a pending sale.
Yeah.
So when you're dealing with a lot of new construction, that time frame is a little skewed. Okay. How about Virginia Beach?
Virginia Beach, they saw an 11% gain in the average sales price from $442,369 in April. That would be the April, $442,000 versus almost $393,000 in March. So that's a pretty significant gain. Chesapeake, we looked at an average sales price of $394,000 versus $370,000. That was a 6% increase. And Norfolk remained pretty flat, and that average sale price was $315,000.
So we're dealing with numbers that are basically still falling within the, quote, affordable range, conforming loans and things of that nature. So we're not talking about $700,000 houses here in terms of averages, right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So when we look over at the peninsula, actually there is a huge gain over there, and that was in Gloucester. They had one of the highest monthly increases with an average sales price of $407,000 in April, compared to $306,000.
Now wait a minute, hold on. How many houses are there in Gloucester?
Exactly right. There's probably 5 houses.
Hey, if you're Gloucester residents, I don't mean to speak disparagingly of you, but the volume is affected. The percentage of change is affected significantly by the number of houses that have been included in the study.
That's right. That's right. And then I'll close that out with Newport News. Again, they remained relatively unchanged with an average sales price of $255,000. That was up 5.8% from last year, with a median of 10 days on the market, and that's compared to 8 days in March. So that no change in price so much. A little bit longer to sell the homes.
Okay, Joyce, we're going to take a short break here, let the advertisers have their say. You're listening to Money Talk 1310 AM 100.9 FM. This is the Real Estate PB&J Hour with Paul Fuqua and his co-host, Joyce Carcase. Look forward to talking to Mr. Lascaro upon your return. Bye. Welcome back. This is Paul Fuqua and my co-host Joyce Carcase. This is the Real Estate PB&J Hour on 1310 Money Talk 1310 AM 100.9 FM and MoneyTalk1310.com. If you want to reach me directly with a question that I can answer offline or off air, you can call me at 757-449-7463. 757-449-7463. That you'll reach me. That's my 24-hour. And I try and answer the phone regardless of the time, although usually after 11 p.m., I'm pretty much zonked. Joyce, you can reach at 757-324-2445, 757-324-2445. Now, we're going to continue with a little bit of the discussion of the prevailing trends statistically and market in terms of the market structure. Joyce, you want to pick up where we left off on the values in the Hampton Roads?
Yeah, actually, I think I closed those out. The only one I left out there was York. Average sales price was $439,000. That was up 14.8% from last year and up almost 13% over March of this year. So that was about a $55,000 gain for the seller.
You know, folks, we look at these average prices, and you should too, because these percentages apply to houses within your neighborhood.
Yep.
So that it has an impact on two things. One, on the approximate market value of your home as it exists now if it were to go on the market, plus these sales will have an impact on the assessed value of your house. When the tax assessor comes around, he's going to look at closed sales in your neighborhood and within a 1 and 3 mile radius to determine what history there is to substantiate either an increase or decrease in the tax assessment. So average price increases impact you directly. You don't see it until you either get your tax bill or you put it on the market with somebody like me. Go ahead, Joyce.
Okay. So, Paul, we're always talking about the stats in Hampton Roads, but one thing, in fact, you had just talked about a client that you were just working with. A lot of people like Hampton Roads. A lot of people, and I know we've relocated quite a few over the past couple of years into the area. And
was astounding. There was again, I'm going to go back to the Grand National event for antique cars at Regent University this weekend, but I was helping people position their trailers for a short time today, and I was amazed at the number of people from the Northeast, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Southern New York. They had a number of people from Canada, and the overwhelming question they had for me was, what's the average price of a house in this area? Because they are experiencing huge increases in their assessments and therefore huge increases in their taxes, which are onerous, to say the least, in New Jersey. So hopefully, I may pick up a couple more buyers if I can find property that they can buy and move into. That's the rub at this point. We have any number of people that are out there looking for really nice houses, and we just don't have the amount of inventory that would meet their needs. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. An interesting fact, though. Even in Northern Virginia, the average home sold $1 million.
Yeah, well,
and that's fair. I mean, my niece sold a home. She was in Fairfax County, a tiny little home. They did a lot of really nice renovations on it, but tiny little home. And I can't believe what they got for it.
What did they get?
What they got, they sold theirs a year and a half ago, and they had already made $670 on it, or somewhere close to that.
So
number.
they netted $670,000 in appreciation.
Not netted in appreciation,
okay.
No, but for what they bought, like half of that.
Well, you realize that again, it's a diminishing landmass. You run into the fact that there's overdevelopment in some areas. You have choke points throughout Northern Virginia, and we know that a month and a half ago, in that area, as populous as it is, there were only 900 houses on the market.
Which was unbelievable.
It's just astounding.
And I think there's only about 1,500 now.
Yeah. Now, think about that. What that population, the greater metropolitan area of Washington, D.C., numbers, if I'm not mistaken, about 8 million, at least at last count when I looked it up, and maybe 9 right now. And I spent almost a lifetime in Washington, D.C. doing business there. And I do know that the house that I sold in 1997, that was my ex-wife sold it, actually, and it was sold in the neighborhood of $800,000 in 1997. And I think the last time it sold, it went at about double that.
I can believe that. I can believe that easily.
And it hadn't been changed. We didn't do much. We added a little room and redid a couple bathrooms and a kitchen over 20 some odd years. But the values there are just astounding because of, one, the significant amount of people who have very high incomes, not wealth, in terms of what we see in areas that have heavy manufacturing and heavy industrial captains of industry. But in terms of the income, there's nothing uncommon to see a $500,000 household income, and that's, in some instances, that's considered a pauper's wage in Washington, D.C., because that's the center of power now. That's what's happened. Anyway, I'm sorry. Keep going. I digress. Okay. Hey, you're listening to Money Talk 1310. We're talking money, so that's what we do when real estate is, in essence, money.
So let's get back to the Realtor.com. This was actually a report, a housing forecast released at the end of last year, okay? And it was talking about listing price appreciation and home sales growth across the nation. And Hampton Roads was actually ranked in the 18th spot nationally with affordability, right? So Danielle Hell, who is the chief economist at Realtor.com, she reported that with the thriving local economies, the low unemployment rates, convenient access to the outdoors, and relatively affordable housing, many of the top markets that we've competed against offer the best of both small town quality of life and big city security.
Yeah, folks, one of the things I tell my clients who relocate from other areas to this is that there are 7 jurisdictions, and every weekend there's something else going on. It's not like small town Puttstown, Iowa, that has, the county fair once a year and then has a parade. Not that there's anything wrong with Kutztown, but Here we have 7 small towns. So there's 7 mini county fairs. There's 7 celebrations of whatever. For instance, this weekend in Chesapeake, there's the Jubilee. And I don't know what the Jubilee is about. I think it's the anniversary of the incorporation of Chesapeake as a city. I don't know.
I don't know.
But they shoot off fireworks, and I remember going down there. They used to have a 4-H thing, and they had horses and cows and pigs.
It's a massive event.
It's kind of neat, And my wife, who happens to work for the City Parks and Recreation Department, she's got passes this week, so we get to park on the grounds.
There you go.
So it's pretty awesome.
You got the Strawberry Festival and Pungo.
Yeah, that's and I think there's even an Italian American Day in honor of the Lascara family. Is that right?
I think so.
Okay.
I think
We'll talk about
so.
that.
Yeah.
And well, we have the parade, the St. Patty's Day parade up in Ocean View in Norfolk.
Yeah.
And the Christmas parades. I mean, it's there is
the invitational for the sand soccer is huge for East Coast
and East Coast surfing championship.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty awesome.
There's a
place
lot
to
going
live.
on down there.
I don't think I'll move.
I think I'll stay.
You're listening to Money Talk 1310 AM and 100.9 FM. This is the Real Estate PB&J Hour with Paul Fuqua and Joyce Carcase. We're realtors, and we're trying to have some fun. At the same time, bring a little bit of information to you. I hope you're not stuck on traffic. I'm going to ask Dino, if we have any further information on what's going on out there in 664?
The last traffic update, they said it was cleared at the Monitor Merrimack. We should be good.
You guys don't have any now. You're heading on home.
Well, we may have gained some if they were in the tunnel and couldn't get reception.
Oh, yeah. Hey, if you're coming out of the tunnel, this is where to be. Put it on Money Talk 1310. All right. Do we need to take a break before we bring Mr. Lascara on?
You can keep it a couple more minutes.
Okay. Joyce, it's up to you. You fill the next 2 minutes.
Well, no, I think we got that filled.
What other hot spots are there? You said we were number 18. What are 1 through 17?
Oh, wait. 1 through 17?
Yeah.
Oh, hang on.
Well, if we're 18, there's 17 guys ahead of us, so let's track them down and see if we can beat them.
So we've got Salt Lake City, Utah, Boise, Idaho, Spokane, Washington, Indianapolis, Indiana, Columbus, Ohio, Providence, Rhode Island, Greenville, South Carolina, Seattle, Washington, Worcester.
I'm
hungry, okay?
Jeez,
and Tampa,
I'm supposed
Florida.
to be the
I'm from
comedian.
Pittsburgh. We just have an impediment.
I didn't see Pittsburgh in this list.
No, I know you did. And Hampton Roads fell in between Daytona, Ohio.
Dayton.
What did I just say? I don't
Daytona.
know what? I took my glasses off. Dayton, Ohio, and Phoenix, Arizona. And
That's not a bad place to be.
No. And who's the last on the list?
Honolulu. Mm-hmm. Have you been to Honolulu?
I have.
Honolulu.
But I was quite young when I went.
Honolulu's a great place to land and then get the little puddle jumper to go to Kauai, which is the westernmost island. If you've ever been in paradise, ever want to be in paradise, go to Kauai. It has such features that are just spectacular. It has the heaviest rainfall in the world, if I'm not mistaken, coming in because of the prevailing westerlies. Anyway, time to break, Dino. This is the Real Estate PB&J Hour, 1310 AM, 100.9 FM. And it's Paul Fuqua and Joyce Carcase. We'll see you in a few minutes with Mr. Lascara, lawyer extraordinaire.
Now back to the Real Estate PB&J Hour on Money Talk 1310 and 100.9 FM. Rosenwomble Realtor Paul Fuqua gives you the fundamentals of real estate selling, buying, owning, and improving your home.
Welcome back. You are listening to the Real Estate PB&J Hour. I'm Paul Fuqua, Rosenwomble Realtor, and I have my co-host Joyce Carcase, also with Rosenwomble and a skilled realtor. And if you have any questions, please feel free to call us at 497-1310, 757-497-1310. Now, if you have any kind of desire to go back and listen to some of the other vaunted guests that we've had, you can go to YouTube. We have a channel there. It is the Real Estate PB&J Hour. We have 18 shows on the can, and you can skip around. We've had distinguished and informative guests who've ranged from appraisers to deputy city managers to the mayor of Chesapeake and an expert on flood insurance and other subjects that are dear to the hearts of real estate owners, which numbers about 60% of the American population, if I'm not mistaken. then that's a great wealth builder for our country. But we're very pleased to have Dominic Lascara, principal at Lascara Law. Actually, it's Dominic P. Lascara, PLC, but LascaraLaw.com. Donnie, welcome. We're glad to have you here. I'm going to be asking you some questions about the differences and responsibilities and elements that comprise conflict over encroachments and easements. But first, I want to describe your practice. You focus on commercial and residential real estate law, business and corporate law, wills and probate of estates. And the last time you were here, you talked about wills and the trust, but this time we want to talk about the living. Let me ask you my first question. What is an encroachment?
Well, first of all, Paul, thanks for having me back.
It's my pleasure.
It's always a joy to be around you and Joyce. An encroachment is really any physical structure that is impending or encroaching on another person's property. And you can think of this as a structure under the ground. It can be a structure on top of the ground. It can be a structure really over the ground, because there are air rights also. So any of these type of physical structures that leave your property and encroach upon another's is an encroachment.
So in other words, if my neighbor pours a driveway and that driveway is sticking 6 inches over my, quote, property line, end quote, that's an encroachment?
That creates an encroachment. It's not their property.
Well, why should we be concerned about them?
Well, if someone has that encroachment that lasts long enough, they may be able to attain legal title to that area where the encroachment exists. But I think the biggest reason is why you should be concerned is one day you may want to sell that piece of property. Right. And that encroachment is certainly going to impact the marketability of that property and possibly the insurability of it.
Well, how do you discover that this occurs? For instance, you can eyeball it. I bring this up in part because I have a client. We're going to be putting their house on the market, and we have not as yet had determined if there is, in fact, an encroachment, but they think that the neighbor's driveway is beyond the property line.
Paul, that is a great question, because so many times as a real estate attorney, I see people buy properties and they've never even gotten a physical survey. And let me stop for a second and just remind the audience that in the state of Virginia, we go by the doctrine caveat emptor, meaning let the buyer beware. When you buy a piece of property that has an encroachment, you buy that problem. That seller may or may not know that there's an encroachment, so the seller's not breaching anything to the buyer. I think that it's so important for anyone buying any real estate to get a physical survey, meaning you have a surveyor go out there. Not only, and you as a realtor, no one in this room can tell someone exactly where their property is. They can look at the fences in the house and give a guess. But that surveyor is going to go out there and he's going to locate these metal pins that are in the ground normally. And he's going to make sure, one, that those metal pins are where they're supposed to be. I can't tell you how many times in my practice I've seen neighbors actually dig up pins and move them to their own advantage where they think their property should be. So a good surveyor is not only going to locate those metal pins, but he's going to make sure those metal pins are where they're supposed to be. That defines the outline of that property. Then that surveyor is going to locate every physical aspect that's on that property.
Okay, go. Joyce has a question.
So I have a question. So the average survey is about $750,000.
50,000?
No, $750. Oh my God! Yeah, did I just say that? No,
Yes.
It's $750 is the average. That, in essence, then can save the buyer thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, right? I mean, have you ever seen that where the survey wasn't in? Like I said, you've got the encroachment. What's the average price that somebody had to pay to remedy a situation?
Well, good question. And the cost of surveys, I've seen them lower, I think, in our area. In Chesapeake, I would say the average cost is between $4,000 and $6,000, but they have gone up a little bit.
Yes.
But so when you get the survey and you find a problem, you find an encroachment, a normal encroachment that we see most of the time is a fence that is built on someone else's property. I think that's the most common encroachment that you'll see in residential closings, and that's really what we're dealing with here. So a lot of times the encroachment is less than a foot. Typically, my rule of thumb is we don't worry about it. You disclose it to your buyer. Less than a foot, I'm not worried about somebody trying to obtain the property by adverse possession. I'm not worried about upsetting the neighbor. It's pretty much a de minimis encroachment. Now, I've had surveys where you see encroachments outside of a foot, outside of 10 feet. Larger properties and acreage sometimes have these encroachments. Generally, there's a couple ways to resolve it. One is just get an agreement. If the buyer is okay with the encroachment, we can get an agreement with the next door neighbor that he acknowledges the encroachment, that he acknowledges in writing that he has permission of the owner for the encroachment. That permission tolls any statute of running, and it prevents that adjoining property owner to later try to claim title to the property by occupying it or using it for a statutory period of time, which is 15 years in Virginia.
It's 15 years.
Does that answer your question, Joyce?
It does. Thanks.
Okay. So that basically, if you give permission for the encroachment to exist as a landowner or a homeowner, and when you're a homeowner, you are a landowner. Remember that what you buy is the land, because your house, which may be 5 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, 2-story, all brick, it isn't described as such in your deed. It's described as an improvement thereon. By the way, that's a great way to win a few dollars at the neighborhood bar. Ask people to describe how their deed describes their house.
Yeah, and let me say another thing about surveys. A lot of times clients will come to me. We have a policy in our office. If someone who's buying a piece of real estate, residential, does not want to get a survey, they have to talk to me. I don't make any money on somebody getting a survey or not getting on a survey. In fact, it's more work for me as an attorney to go over the survey. But I feel like somebody is using me as legal counsel in most likely their biggest investment of their life, and I just want to make sure they understand the pitfalls of not getting a survey. That's just a policy.
Right.
Now, a lot of times...
Let me go back. Okay. What happens if I'm a seller and I think that the neighbor has encroached on my property? What steps do I take? And I haven't put it on the market.
You're a seller. You don't have to do anything.
Well, how do I get that encroachment fixed?
You think that your neighbor's property is encroaching onto yours?
Yeah, I know from what, in this particular instance, the neighbor's driveway is over the line by no less than 6 to 8 inches for a considerable distance.
Well,
now how
do you know?
Because my client said so, and because my client had the survey in hand and cited down from the pin to the pin, and if you just by line of sight reckoning, he didn't use a laser, line of sight reckoning, hey, it's sticking over there.
Couple approaches. You don't have to do anything. The buyer could take the property subject to the fact that driveway is on his property, and he may not care.
But what if the seller, the owner of the property that is encroached upon, what if he wants it corrected? What steps can he take?
Well, the first step, of course, is talk to the neighbor or see an attorney.
The neighbor says, hey, doesn't mean a thing. I'm not going to do this. What do you do then?
Well, then you could take legal action. You could say that I'm going to go ahead and remove that part of your driveway, which is on my property. And I've written letters like this before, right, where we give the adjoining owner, we apprise him of the situation. We probably will send a survey to show, right, that there is an encroachment. Give him a certain period of time. Try to be friendly.
Right.
Give him a period of time to remedy the situation. If not, the owner. Sometimes I've basically said we're going to take the effort to remove the encroachment, and we're going to bill you for the effort,
right? Because
you're trespassing.
Okay.
Now
if it's
one more remedy, which kind of leads into the next topic, is you could grant an easement. They could do a private easement between the parties, allowing that encroachment,
right?
Legally allowing it, but not to.
Now, when you do an easement, you're not giving up title to that sliver of land,
no,
right?
You're giving up a use, some aspect of it, but not possession, not ownership.
Now,
possession, you would be giving up ownership.
Right.
But it wouldn't necessarily be exclusive.
Okay. Now, let's say there's been an encroachment, it's been in place for 14 years, and you've never given permission for the encroachment. You've tried to alert the neighbor that you want it corrected, and he hasn't done anything. Does that clock of 15 years, does that keep resetting every time you provide notification to that neighbor that this is a problem?
No, in fact, that even hurts it because you're acknowledging the adverse use of it.
Okay.
and you're not doing anything to stop it, which you need to stop that from tolling.
Okay.
And that's either one, get permission, or remove the encroachment.
Give permission. But once you give permission, you can withdraw.
Well, once the party that's doing the encroaching acknowledges that he has received permission, then that tolls the statute because it's permissive. Once it's permissive, you can't claim by adverse possession, or prescriptive easement is a term you would use with an easement being used so long. So you could use somebody's property, you could drive across their property, you're not taking possession, you're not living, or you're not on that property, you're just going across it.
Right.
You could do that for a statutory period of time.
That's 15 years.
That's 20 years
20
for
years.
prescriptive easement. And you could have a legal use of that easement. You're not getting possession like adverse possession, but you're getting a legal use of that property by using it for a statutory period.
Okay. So, folks, I don't want to get too complicated, but this is an important consideration, especially when you're dealing with older boundaries.
Yes.
Especially when people have put sheds and barns and other outbuildings close to the property line. And when they do that, let's say I own 3 acres in Hickory, and somebody, my next door neighbor, unbeknownst to me, builds a shed, and that shed is 3 feet over my line. I provide him notification. Hey, you're encroaching on my line. Now, I don't have a survey, but I can tell by where everything was and my fences. And I say, you're over the line. And he says, I'm not going to do anything about it. What do I do?
Get a lawyer.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
I understand.
Or look, if something's on your property,
can I take my tractor and just knock it over?
Understand something. If that physical structure is on your property, it's yours.
Oh, okay.
But you're not going to. So you want to give somebody the opportunity to do the right thing and move it. And then I wouldn't recommend moving it right away. I'd recommend putting them on notice that you intend to move it to avoid any possible damages against you. But let me just say one more aspect about surveys real quick, though. A lot of times people don't get a survey, and they ask me, "Can I get one later?" Yes, but surveys are going to uncover problems before they buy the problem.
Yes.
And even if they don't uncover problems, and you say, "Oh, I wasted money for a survey," not really, because if you've got a home, and let's say you want to later do a fence, a deck, a room addition, a gazebo, you're going to need that physical survey as a site plan with the city to get the permit that needs to be issued to build what you need to build. So it has many uses.
Okay, go on.
I mean, I could just, I come to mind, I have a good friend of mine that I was representing, and I was just demanding him to get a survey because I just wanted him to have this protection. He was buying a lot of acres.
Right.
It was a little more expensive than he wanted to be, but he bought it.
Right.
So he gets the survey, everything was fine, and I remembered that his wife called me, and we were friends. She called me probably about 3 weeks later, and she says, "Please don't tell my husband, but he's already used the survey 3 different times." He was doing it. He had to do a drain field. He was doing a pool. He was doing, and he needed it.
Yeah. Hey, folks, I know that Mr. Lascara closed on a house that I bought many years ago, and we wanted to build a deck. And he gave me the same speech, and I said, "Oh, hey, man, no problem."
And let me say one more thing about surveys.
Right.
If you're getting a loan to buy a residential home, your lender is not going to require you to get a survey. And why is that?
I don't understand that at all. It doesn't make sense.
Because the title insurance companies that insure these transactions, they all take exceptions to matters of survey. So if you buy a house, there's an encroachment, and it becomes a lien or it becomes an issue with your title insurance is not going to cover you for matters that would have been revealed had you gotten a survey. So why doesn't the lender want the same protection? Because the title companies, they insure the lenders over matters of survey. They do not insure the homeowners.
So if I take owner's policy, that an encroachment would not be insured?
You're not insured, no. Now, if you get a physical survey, and of course the physical survey is going to show the encroachment, then the title company is going to demand that be dealt with if you want insurance on that.
We're down to about the last 4 minutes of our thing. I'm going to ask you one other quick question. I know that you as a law office, you place an order for a survey, but the buyer or the seller alike have to pay in advance. That's not something that's paid at closing?
Not necessarily, no. I would say, I would be contrary to that. I would say 95% of the surveys that I've done have all been paid at closing.
Okay.
And that's a risk the surveyor takes, but the buyer knows he's bought it. The problem is the buyer sometimes thinks that they don't have to pay anything if the contract gets terminated or if there's a release for various reasons. Yeah. But if that survey is ordered, that third-party vendor needs to be paid.
And that's paid in most instances by the buyer? Or
by the buyer. Typically the buyer orders the survey.
Now, would it behoove a seller to have a survey if he can't locate it? I'm thinking of the house that's built in a subdivision and you had a lot and you had the layout, the plat is what they was called, and this is where the house is. But they never did a survey of the house as built.
I just typically wouldn't recommend a seller to order a survey unless he really thinks it's going to be a problem. He wants to deal with a problem before he puts it on the market.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, maybe.
You have to understand, folks, I'm a real estate agent, and what I try and do when I have a prospective listing is I want to know what the obstacles are to getting the deal closed. And if there's an encroachment by a neighbor, I want to know, how do we deal with this? If there's an easement in place, I want to know what the easement is so that my seller can answer questions emphatically and clearly and provide clarification as to what they're selling. We hate surprises because if the survey's not showing up until the closing table and all of a sudden the buyer goes, hey, wait a minute, I didn't know that I was giving up this corner of my property to a guy's shed.
Yeah, but understand something. If you're a seller getting that survey, the buyer legally cannot use it. It's copyright material. Now, that survey, if he wants to do it for the buyer,
I understand.
he has to buy it.
No, yes. I understand. It's to a benefit. How much time do we have, Dino? We have 2 minutes, okay? Folks, I've enjoyed this. Donnie, you've been a friend and a good advisor to me for 20-some-odd years, it's 25 years. And what other advice do you have to people when they're dealing with issues of property lines? Is there any other one thing? You got a minute?
Well, I mean, there's so much advice you can give someone. Obviously, you're always going to do a full title search.
Right.
You've got to do the title search because you've got to see what is a public record.
Right.
And that's what's going to uncover. Survey is certainly, very important. You can obviously, there's other ways to look at you can go down to the clerk's office and get a copy of your subdivision plat, which is not a physical survey if you have some concerns, but nothing's going to deal with encroachments better than an actual physical survey.
Okay. And they actually come out and they check for the pins, and they'll locate pins if they can't find any. So you know exactly what you're selling. We're coming down to the last minute. I'm going to tell you again, this is Paul Fuqua with Rose and Womble Realty. This is the Real Estate PB&J Hour. And we hope that you'll listen to us every week on Thursday at 5 o'clock and go to our channel. My co-host is Joyce Charcase, and I thank her for being here. And I thank you, Johnny, very much for being so lucid in explaining what can be very confusing. The language itself, encroachment, easements, it connotes negativity, and you don't want to have that creep into a transaction. I thank you very much for being here, folks.
Appreciate you having me.
Come back with us next Thursday. Money Talk 1310, the Real Estate PB&J Hour. Bye-bye.